Hello and welcome to the Pleb Philosophers. This is Matthew.
And this is Paul. Welcome back to our second session today.
Yeah, and Paul, what are we going to be discussing tonight?
So, today we have an interesting topic which we all love to talk about, some more than others, and that is politics.
Oh, lovely politics. Everyone's most favourite subject to talk amongst their families. And
Say, and
not.
oh,
Oh crap. Like with families, it's really hard to discuss politics with family, right? Because it's almost like the tribe. You know, you, if you bring about a different opinion to the tribe, it's all la 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 la. You know.
you'll get shunned and alienated in your own
Yeah,
family
it's
sometimes.
like
Yeah.
for an example, right? In Australia, where we're from, we have two major political parties, right? Labor and Liberal, right? And just like in America, any other place, if you're like say a Labor going to a Liberal family, and if you discuss anything Labor, it's like World War fucking three.
I mean,
So
obviously it depends on the family,
it,
but
it, it
there
does depend
is,
on the family, but
yeah,
like generally there's quite a bit. It's like, oh, you're one of them. So let's go into that deeper, right? Let's go into that sense. So
right.
why do we think? Why the hostility? Do you think?
Well, I think it's a cultural thing. See, some cultures, and I've seen this overseas, they actually like to talk more about politics and they bring it up more in family discussion.
Oh yeah,
Um, and yeah, because it's actually brought to the table, it's in the culture. It's sort of expected. And if you have a different opinion, as long as it's not too extreme, it can actually be a good thing. And people just like to discuss and potentially even argue. But that's more of a social cultural aspect, I suppose. Whereas here in Australia, like you said, we can be a bit more narrow-minded in families.
mm,
But I think that's just a common human feature, right? Is if someone has a different opinion from you and you don't share it, you're probably not gonna compromise your own beliefs, and that's true for anything, not just politics.
oh yeah. So
Well,
in a
yeah.
way, it's our sort of politics is almost Americanized because you see the same mentality a lot in America, right?
It's very left versus right. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah, those two sides of the spectrum. There's
yeah.
not much middle ground. Like, for example, the Greens, if you wanted to look at it, as a third party. Um, you know, you don't see them all the time in a left versus right side of it.
Yeah.
They're
So I
sort of
mean,
tucked away in the corner.
it really sucks because I wish in all modern day that we discuss politics freely and without hostility, right? Because like in ancient Athens, that was a very common thing to do to discuss politics, to
Mm,
dissect it, to analyze it, to get to see what your votes your vote's worth something, right? A lot of people seem to think that, and I've spoken to many people about this shit. A lot of people seem to think that their vote doesn't count. They're like their vote's useless. Like, what's the point, right? That mentality is so goddamn awful. That kind of ruins the political system which we have,
of
right?
a democracy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because I mean, each and
can.
every single person's vote bloody counts because a lot of people have that mentality and that affects things. And so, why do you think that is?
That's a bit of a tricky thing because it's what they believe, right, about their voting effect. Like, for example, they are, after all, in Australia, one out of what is it, 10 to 20 million voters, which they have to compete with in that sense.
Mm,
Like, you're just one individual out of the many voters. So obviously, sure, you maybe your vote doesn't matter as much if you look at it from that perspective. However, if everyone thinks like that, then you have 15 million people who believe their vote doesn't really count, and then they might start voting for weird things, which they might otherwise not ordinarily do.
or
And that's
regret?
when, yeah, or regret. And that's when you get, you know, when that mentality, I suppose, becomes a bit more dangerous. If they're thinking, oh well, my vote doesn't count anyway, I'm going to vote for an extremist who everyone knows is extreme and everybody hates, but why not? Full funds.
Yeah.
I think that's what the danger could be as to why people are like that. eh, I suppose it's just a societal thing, right?
Yeah.
We've had democracy for a while now, and for a lot of people, we've been born up and raised in this type of environment. So we haven't actually had to work very hard to vote, and we have a lot of benefits in Australia. So, because of that lack of responsibility of earning it, just because we've been given it from birth, I think that's maybe why it doesn't feel as important because we haven't actually worked very hard to get it,
So
if at
like,
all, for some people.
so it's more so like we haven't seen any like major conflicts, and we haven't seen like the bad side of things. We've only seen one
Well,
one,
we
and is
haven't,
that it?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we haven't had to challenge ourselves for the right to vote. I
Yeah.
mean, I think the only thing you have to do is sign up online, which is mandatory anyway.
Yeah.
So that's for most people, or many people, I should say, it's more of a chore than a challenge. So it's sad, but I think that's why it is, just because there's no worth from their perspective having that freedom to vote.
Okay. Yeah.
What about yourself, Matthew?
Yeah. No, I completely agree. It's like.
Hmm.
Like 15, like possibly 15, well, I mean, could be less, could be even more for all we know, but like, the fact that so many people have that mentality, they could corrupt the very voting system and vote in a complete fuckhead and ruin things even further. And then, yeah, we would be just as guilty as the person we voted in because we voted him in. You know, it's a huge responsibility to have. And when people think it's a bloody joke, it's not. It's the furthest thing
Well,
from that.
it's funny you mention that because it reminds me of earlier democracies back in Greece and even in Roman times. Is that not every citizen had the right to vote?
Mm,
So for starters, yeah, it would be the male citizens, not the females. And then second of all, it would be those that had to have a certain amount of wealth or property.
yeah,
It wasn't just every random slave or peasant in the
yeah.
country.
Yeah, no, you're
So
right.
yeah, and that I think because it was limited to a certain demographic of people, maybe a smaller percentage of the population, but because it was more precious, I think people appreciated it more.
Yeah,
And I think because it was valued higher, if you actually had the right to vote, I think you'd be proud. It's like, oh, I'm a part of the higher part of the society in Greece because I can vote now.
yeah,
I'm a very privileged person. I'm a
yeah,
minority.
exactly, yeah.
So it's funny you mention that because of that, I reckon people may have voted differently back then
Mm,
compared to now, just because there was more value or perceived value of being able to vote.
yeah, that's actually absolutely right. But like, so speaking on the subject of democracy and stuff, I always find it interesting how all the ancients did, because democracy was invented in Athens, and
Like from our modern
well,
democracy,
just
what
like,
we consider it. Yeah.
yeah, well, just like in general, like the foundations of
Mm.
democracy was made in Athens. I found it really interesting. There's one aspect which I wish that we had was that how they voted. So they would have two people on a forum or an amphitheater or whatever stage that they would
Hmm.
have, and they would openly debate amongst each other. And for each decision being made, there was like a certain disc or symbol, and each person had access to that. And whatever symbol got the most, like in a bigger stack,
Mm.
they that vote would become law, or whatever it is that they were discussing becomes it. I really wish we had that sort of power as a democracy now, because everything politics is a weird, it's a weird thing, right? We don't
Yeah.
really know too much about it. It's like its own world, you know.
Mm.
And it's
It's
really it's like it's so essential, important for advanced civilization, yet we know barely anything about,
Well,
right?
and I think the fact in Australia, all what we're generally involved in is voting, once every few years for your candidate. And that's all what we'll ever have for most people to do with politics.
Mm,
I think that's part of it, right? Is
yeah,
because we're voting for someone to make the laws on our behalf and
yeah,
represent our interests.
yeah. We
So we're not
elect,
actually, yeah,
yeah,
we're,
we
we're a
elect
representative
representatives, yeah,
democracy, yeah.
yeah, and
And it's like you're
it's
saying, though, back then they voted on specific issues.
yeah.
Whereas we don't do that. We
And
just vote
I
for
really
parties.
wished we had access. I'm pretty sure maybe I'm a bit of a retard. Maybe we do. I mean, you never know. I mean, there could be some site out there, but like, for every major source I've ever looked at, there's like
Hmm.
nothing. And also, for our viewers over here, there's a little interesting fact. It's not very well known fact, but our democracy, here in Australia at least, is a privilege, not a right. Because out of all technicality, we're not even really a democracy. Whereas what is called a constitutional monarchy. Eh?
So yeah,
Not many people know about that. Like many people think that we're just democracy.
a lot of people seem to forget that yes, we actually have a queen that is in our constitution.
Yeah,
And she, by the laws and all the written in the constitution, she's allowed a parliament and a governor general and everything to rule on her behalf and manage everything. So yeah,
yeah.
it's a lot of people forget that.
So like, in other words, like the voice of the queen. Because I'm pretty sure, now correct me if I'm wrong, the
Yep.
governor general can veto or remove a prime minister in certain
Yes.
conditions.
So on
And hasn't that
paper,
happened in the
he can.
past? Because I think that happened in the past.
I wouldn't be able to tell if it's happened in the past in Australia. I
I
remember once there was something about the writ, as in the voting, something to do if that was suspended or held up at some point. But I'm not sure if a prime minister's ever been fired. Uh, we can take a look on Google.
the
Oh,
first search, has any Australian prime minister
yeah.
been assassinated?
So on 11th November 1975, Governor General Sir John Kerr terminated Whitlam's appointment as Prime Minister in Australia at 1 p.m. on 11th November 1975.
Well, there you go.
Okay. And this is taken from the Australian government website. I just get up which state. But yeah, no, it's listed here. There you go. No, you're right. It's happened
Yeah,
before. So those people who think that the Governor General is just a figurehead may be mistaken. They do
yeah.
have a bit more power. So that's
Uh,
from the National Archives of Australia.
and this lack of knowledge and insight has it makes me concerned on just how little we actually know about it. And I just think that I think in like schools we should be taught more about politics. Like it should be more mandatory
Mm.
because it says as before, politics plays such an essential part. Without it, we'd all be like cavemen. But even then, there's politics in that too. So I mean,
They're
you
yeah,
can't escape
hierarchies.
you
Mm.
can't escape politics, no matter what, right?
So I think if I want to add this on, a quick definition of politics itself, I think is very relevant. So, politics, the activities associated with the governance of a country or area, especially the debate between parties having power.
Mm,
Or there's a second definition, activities aimed at improving someone's status or increasing power within an organization. So, looking at those two definitions, absolutely. They're all about governance and control of a country and a group.
mm,
So, even if you have a bunch of cavemen in a cave, you have a social group there already.
Yeah.
And if a hierarchy forms, well, then you could argue politics is happening because there's control occurring in the cave.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And what's really cool is that
absolutely.
it's not just humans who do politics. Chimpanzees, gorillas,
Mm.
lions, meerkats. You know, it. A lot of people seem to think that politics is just a man-made thing, but nah. Animals do it too. Hell, even like dolphins and whales even demonstrate politics.
So I think there's nothing funnier than watching some chimpanzees do a coup d'état and then comparing that to some real life event that has happened.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
Not that I'm gonna bring out any examples, but it happens everywhere.
Yeah, no, it happens everywhere. You know, you can be politics can be a monkey's business. But yeah. So back what was going on about before our lack of knowledge. Do you
Mm.
think that we should have more political knowledge? Like should politics be a mandatory subject at schools?
Well, politics really, right, is about understanding governance, I suppose,
Yeah.
or control, how things are run and managed. Um, Not everyone wants to be a leader or a manager, and many people don't even want to be involved with that. They don't want to have anything to do
Well,
with leading or controlling others.
it's not just
So
that. It's just
I
it's like knowing what's being voted in, how to vote, know what
yeah,
parties who.
yeah, sure. The basics of of what you're required to do in Australia as a voting
But just
citizen,
like not just in
absolutely.
Australia, but like just in general, like all across the world.
Well, if we're talking about teaching politics, I think it should be done as a history subject, not necessarily as a subject. This is what you do in modern times, purely because then, especially in public schools, that can be twisted a little bit to, influence the current students on how they might vote. So I think that's one issue with it. But if it's taught as a historical topic and not limited to democracy, but various types of government types as well,
Mm,
sure. I think that's well, as in we already sort of do it right now in school, but maybe a bit more and in depth into different types of politics.
mm. Because like you see, I get it, but I think that knowing what say a bill is, or what our constitution
Mm.
is, or knowing what a vote is worth, or knowing how to identify corruption, that sort of thing. I think that should be
Taught
mandatory.
more.
Yeah, it should be
Yeah.
taught more because people know nothing about it. Like they just they know
Yeah.
too little on something that's so powerful. You
I mean,
know.
look, considering how a lot of people don't even know what our planet looks like geographically, where, Australia is, where Europe is, where America is, just, the basics. I do think it's a bit sad that that's the level of our education system, not just here, but overseas as well. But
Mm,
uh, it'd be nice to have, but I don't know if it'd really be necessary
mm.
or make an impact for that matter. It'd be nice, but in an ideal world, we'd all be responsible voters and would know what's going on. But sadly, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, well,
Um,
can't always be
yeah,
responsible, can we?
yeah. Well, I mean, look, if you were talking about politics, there's some other countries overseas in current day times where they don't even vote, or the votes don't really matter.
Mm,
And some more different types of ideologies.
yeah.
Say, well, what do we have? We have communists. We still have some communist countries. I don't think we have any fascists left. There aren't any
Yeah.
Nazis left. What other modern types of politics do we have? Government types. I think it's mainly communism and some form of democracy.
Yeah,
There are
those are
monarchies.
generally the main two would be communism
Mm.
and democracy.
We do have a few monarchies around,
Yeah,
like us, for example.
yeah. We still have some monarchs around. So there is something like I remember talking to a fellow one day, and he said that he was a socialist. And I said, okay. And he said a lot of people tend to confuse socialism with communism. Like
Right?
I've
Yeah.
noticed, or like with nationalism and fascism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Like, what? Because I mean, one end is soft, right? One end is like soft. It's not an extreme. It's light.
Just
It's like a
yeah.
light end of the light end. And then we
Nationalism
got
just may mean you like your country or love your country.
yeah.
Yeah.
But then that gets tied around with fascism. Like why do you think that? Do you think that was the result of the Cold War? You think that
Uh,
people often associate socialism with communism?
Well, I mean, it's the same reason people associate nationalism with fascism, or rather, fascism with Nazism, right?
Yeah.
It's just because they're on the same side of that area. So if you're looking over in that direction, oh, it's all the same thing. They're all just, Nazis or commies.
Hmm.
So yeah, propaganda would probably have a part of that to do from the Cold War.
Yeah.
The, um, but I think it's just a human thing, right? Like, if you're in a uniform, right, for a military, there's still medics and doctors in that uniform, but you still sort of lump them in the same category
Hmm.
because they're all wearing those colors, right?
Yeah.
So I'd say it's similar to that.
Okay. And I've been looking around and asking around a bit. There seems to be an ever rise of socialism, and we kind of see it everywhere now. It's mainly associated
Mm.
with our generation and the youth.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to figure out in my mind why. Like, because I remember in the Cold War and all that, if you just so mention the color red, they're like, what the
Ah.
fuck? You know, it's
Mm.
is it because we don't have any major conflicts that prohibits it? Do you think that it's on the rise because
Mm.
we've seen so much corruption in our democracies that people want something different? You think? So
So
I wouldn't mind trying to
yeah,
figure that bit out.
certainly, Matthew. I think this is something we should definitely delve into. And the one thing I will say about it, just on the surface, is that especially youths, they're in our generation, they're the ones that bring in change. They want something new. They want to do something, and it's always like that, right? A lot
Mm,
of the revolutionaries, or at least the ones that follow the revolutionaries, a lot of them are youths. A lot of them are young people.
yeah,
And that's just because we're at the age where we just want to do something, right?
yeah,
And we sort of follow the nice scent of whatever it may be. And in this case, it's socialism. So yeah, maybe in modern times, a lot of people aren't satisfied with democracy, and if you're not voting, there's nothing else you can really do. And if people think the votes don't matter, sure, then
mm,
they might believe socialism is a much better alternative.
mm,
If we look at Marxism, for example, I was reading a book called Introducing Marxism recently, and a lot of it is just about trying to say that, well, every worker, every person should have, the opportunity to earn most of their money for themselves and not pass it on, to the big boss who takes, say, 90% of the overall income.
mm.
And in theory, yeah, that's great. We want higher wages. We don't want to be slaves. Who wants to be exploited? I mean, really,
Exactly. Yeah. No. No one
Matthew,
wants
do
to.
you want to be a slave?
Oh hell yeah, man! I love being a
Yeah,
slave.
yeah, a slave to what?
Yeah,
Perhaps
yeah, my boss,
philosophy.
man. Yeah, it's slave to
Yeah,
philosophy, man. I'm stuck buried in my head in books and thinking too much.
but would you want to be working 20 hours a day in a Chinese sweatshop making smartphones? Probably
Yeah,
not.
nah. Or
Nah?
or working overtime on an office job and all that. But like, I think,
Hmm.
in my honest to God opinion, like why people are slowly going towards more socialism is
Yep.
because I think it's nice to have a collective because
To be a part of
that's
something.
yeah, to be part of something. It's
Yeah.
like socialism is a collective ethos. It is all about the collective. It, but it's still, because it's not, say, communism, where it's an extreme. You still have like individualist goods and all that,
Mm.
but it's more so things shouldn't belong to um, the free
The
market
rich
and
ruling
things. Yeah,
class.
exactly,
Yeah.
and more money distribution, because I'm pretty sure economists can agree with me, and you're gonna be spending money to get it flowing, to get a good economy. I mean, that's
Mm.
why we all got the surplus for COVID, right? Is for us to spend to get the economy jumped up again. Because
Yeah.
if we're all hogging our currency, well,
There's no
how
flow.
how's
Yeah.
that how's it going to be an economy if there's no flow? So I think people also like that aspect, but I think now, just want to say, I think,
Yeah. You
don't know.
think? Yeah.
I think it's all opinion
It's all
based.
our
It's
opinions.
all it's
Yeah.
all our opinions. Um, I think a lot of people are also scared on the power. So, for
Hmm.
instance, I mean, I know we often say a lot of things about Australia. Well, it is, but
We're here. We
uh,
can see it
we're here. We,
firsthand.
we can
Yeah.
see it firsthand, right? Bloody. Now the bank has just slipped out of my mind. Hold up.
one
Oh,
one of the major banks or
ANZ Bank. ANZ Bank took
ANZ.
over all of Suncorp Bank.
Right.
They took it all over. Like boom, like Microsoft did to
Um,
Bethesda, and then Microsoft did to Activision. It's the fact that companies can absorb other companies,
mm,
right? And it's also like the very survival things which we rely on, right? Electricity, homes, food, land,
yeah.
right? All those are generally owned by corporations.
Yeah.
Now, people also don't like the fact that things can change like that. I mean, with the food,
Hmm.
if several companies go down, we're screwed. And just like in
Yeah.
Australia, again, as another example, we have an
Mm,
energy crisis that we have to rely on old generators to keep Queensland going. All because how did it start again? First it was COVID, but then something happened. So
was it
I remember
was it
something
about
happened.
coal?
Yeah, it was about the coal. I think
Well,
it was something that happened.
considering we're a producer of coal, I have no idea how we could lack coal itself. I don't think we could, seeing as we're
Yeah,
supplying the world with it. But
yeah.
it could be a trade thing with China as well, potentially.
It could be, but the fact is, like, if a company can goes down, we're
Mm.
screwed. I mean, hell, even our water's controlled by companies. If
Yeah,
they're gone,
yeah,
essentially,
that's true.
if the whole corporation goes down, we go down. And then
Well, it's
that's
because
and the
yeah.
youth knows this. The youth knows this, and they're like me. I'm scared of that too. Like, I think that's just really scary. The fact that everything can go crumbling down at once, and we're screwed, right?
Well, that's true for any government type, though, right?
Oh
Because let's
yeah,
say if it was not privatized, it wasn't in the hands of a few companies, and say it was state owned, if something happens with the government, that can still shut down too.
yeah. You can
Um,
shut down, but like you can literally just slap money at it, and it'll go back up.
yeah, well, I
Instead of
suppose
like
the
all
government
the
has the funds.
yeah, and all the intricacies that go along with it. But yeah, I think
Well,
that's also a major, like, that fear factor
mm,
goes into why the youth is slowly becoming more and more socialistic.
well,
But
I
it's
can
also
understand the concern if if one company say owned all the water and all the electricity, because then they can set the prices for whatever they want.
exactly, and that's a
So
big
I can
concern.
see that risk.
But
Yeah.
also on a more funnier side, I think it's also more that rebellious nature. I think like people want to
Use.
be that rebel, yeah, we're fucking rebel.
I mean,
It's like, because
well,
it's still a weird
yeah,
thing to openly say that you're a socialist, isn't it?
you're right.
Would
It
be
is a strange
it's
thing.
a strange thing, and to say all that, I guess in the eyes of the many, you'd be classed as sort of like a rebel figure sort of thing, you know.
Well, So, speaking of rebel figure, what if you called yourself a nationalist?
See, I think, and from
Hmm.
what I could tell, if you say you're a nationalist, people are gonna automatically class you as Nazi. Now, I've spoken to a few people about that whole nationalist thing, and yeah,
Hmm.
they often say that if you say you're a nationalist, the first thing that comes up in their brain is fascism. You're a Nazi, right?
Hmm.
And in a way, I don't blame them.
Well, look, that's the same thing though in regard to the socialism thing, right? Is that if you think of socialism, you think of communism, then you might label a socialist as a communist automatically. I think it's similar to what you just said there with nationalism and being a Nazi.
Yeah,
I think that's the similarity, which
yeah.
was, yeah.
I mean, I personally view nationalism as nothing wrong. It's just someone who really likes your country. You know, your
Mm.
country first before anything else.
And then ultra nationalism is when you're maybe taking it too far.
To find that. And then we have our subclasses, you know, fascism and Nazism and all that fun stuff, you know.
uh,
The
well, I
subclass
mean,
of nationalism.
look, I'm always down to, loving Rome for what it was, but we're very proud people. Um, not the easiest to talk to if you had something to say which was against Rome.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, they definitely had like a bit of an autocratic thing going for
mm,
them. But
yeah,
in turn, I mean, this is coming from a Roma, but you know, someone who absolutely fucking loves Rome.
loves Rome, yeah.
They got shit done. They
Mm.
built gigantic monuments. They
Well, they
and they're
conquered the
buildings.
Mediterranean and
Yeah,
they made roads everywhere,
and
which
they
we
made
still
roads.
see
Our
today.
roads
Last couple of
suck.
years.
Our roads suck. And it can
I
like they could be like you can fill it up, and then boom, like after a few months, and then fucking potholes. Rome, fuck, they have no goddamn potholes. Their shit gets stronger each year because the concrete they bloody used.
So I have a feeling that, maybe driving on those roads versus modern roads will be a little bit different. But in saying that, the German Autobahn, the one Hitler was making, I'm pretty sure that is still around today. Obviously needs repairs, but I think I think you need a big empire to make really good roads that last a long time.
Yeah,
So we may not see really good roads in Australia for a little while longer.
yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm.
not for a while anyway.
Uh, but I've always wanted to drive in an autobahn. So how you can go at any speed you want.
Yeah, there
I'm
are
sure.
a few
I'm sure. There's a
limited zones in Europe.
lot of grease monkeys out there who would love to rev their car and go.
So look, admittedly, in Australia, so we have, for those that may not know, we have a lot of speed limits here. There's only a few unlimited zones in, I think, Northern Territory and some other places, but it's a lot more common in Europe. And even if it's not, like you're generally looking at 130 kilometers per hour as like your standard.
Hmm.
So that's something which you get only on some highways here. It's
Yeah.
very rare, which is sad. But
Yeah, it is sad.
anyway, enough about roads. You see how politics, funny enough, can lead to roads because
Uh,
all roads lead to Rome.
Rome, yeah.
I wonder who was marketing that.
Yeah, I wonder.
Uh,
Hey, it was
But
true back then.
mm, something interesting, right, about communism and socialism. So I was reading up on it. Is that Marxism was also developed in Germany, which I find funny because a lot of socialists quote and use the Marxism as the sort of manifesto, as their guideline, the Bible. And
Yeah.
this is the same country that Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, doing the same thing. It's like, okay, same country, also only 100 years apart, not
Yeah.
even.
Yeah, it's
That's
like wow.
fairly similar. Yeah,
Yeah,
so
it's like
maybe
Germany's the
yeah.
fatherland of modern freaking politics. It's
But
always Germany. It's like
yeah.
Germany's always the goddamn main character of the world. fucking always
For
starting
modern
shit.
time.
Yeah, for Rome, bloody Arminius, the bastard,
Gutenberg
Teutoburg
Forest.
Forest, and then
Yeah.
World War I, World War II, and then the
Look,
bloody separation between
well,
West
look,
and East Germany and
look.
fucking.
World War One was more Austria, with the prince being assassinated. But
Yeah, but who paid the price?
yeah, well, so definitely Austria. They shrunk. Austria-Hungary Empire disappeared. Um,
uh, yeah, the
I
Germans had
see
to
your
pay the
point
damn
though.
bill.
I think a lot was in the past few hundred years has been revolving around Germany and Europe.
Yeah,
But I suppose that makes sense. It revolved around Europe because of colonization. The rest of the world was still tagging along in regards to technology from
mm,
what was being developed in Europe,
mm,
and Germany was a major player there.
mm. So,
So,
speaking of colonialism and stuff, so what are your thoughts? I'll discuss my thoughts too on
mhm.
imperialism. What do you think of that?
Imperialism.
Just
Okay,
as a
you know what?
general ideology, not so to make
Okay,
things a little bit more fair and
yeah,
unbiased. We'll
give
strip
it back.
all the examples of imperialism, like the
Mhm.
British Empire, the Spanish, the French, and
Yeah, just
Rome,
in
and just
general.
just in general as an ideology. What do you think of it?
Okay. All right. To explain my answer, first we'll get the definition. So, imperialism is the policy of extending a country's power and influence through colonization, use of military force, or other means. So, it's about extending power and influence, mostly through violence, to other countries.
Yeah,
That is something, that is, if we think about it, is very broad because it
yeah,
means, having any influence over other countries is imperialism, which we've been doing for millennia, thousands of years. The
mm,
Egyptians did it, Rome has done it. So, what do I think about it? I think that it's just human nature. It is
yeah,
in our nature to, bring our will to someone else and try to make them submit. I think
yeah,
some people are just inclined to do that, whether it be, through politics, money, bribery, just influencing, persuading, whatever it is. It's just something people do, just,
yeah,
so they can have their way. So I think it's a common human fact that we do that.
mm.
I can't say that it's wrong or bad. It's just human nature. So that's my answer. It's just human.
Asshole, you stole my answer.
Is
I was
that what
gonna
it was?
say human nature, like no, no. Okay, so like my thoughts
Maybe
of
I should have let you go first. Yeah.
well, like my thoughts of imperialism, like it is pretty bad from a
Hmm.
modern democratic sort
From
of from a modern democratic point of view. It's kind of evil,
sure,
but like back
because it,
then,
yeah.
it's it's viewed as good. But it's like it's the art of taking over things. It's just that's all that it really is, taking over things through aggressive means. So I myself, I don't think like it's a brilliant short term solution
Hmm.
for something. If you're a warlike nation and you want to get another country, imperialism is generally the best way to go about it. However, as so now we can sort of
Yeah.
pin history into this. Long term, imperialism is absolute dog shit. Like the
Okay.
populace, because if your empire falls and all your subjects, because they're so underdeveloped,
Hmm.
they're screwed, and so is the fallen empire, or just in general, because it's all about take, 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 take. It's not about development. It's not about building. It's take.
Mm, I see your point, but I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this.
Yeah,
I don't think that it's actually negative in the long run. If anything, it's the other way around. I think it's actually provided a lot more stability to technology and infrastructure. Using that example, right? You have to be stronger, at least in some areas, to take over other countries, right?
yeah,
Makes sense, because otherwise they'll win, and then you'll be taken over instead.
yeah,
So it means that the stronger country will be left over.
Yeah.
or stronger state, whatever. So if we use Rome as an example, started off really small just in Italy, and it kept getting stronger and stronger, and imperialist, they're bending other countries around them to their will. But because of that, because you had that continuous growth, you've seen infrastructure improve, you've seen technology improve. And yes, like you said, eventually that will fall, as do all things. However, the technology that has been built up in the meantime, it still transitions to the next people.
Mm.
For example, if we use modern day colonialism, right, from the British Empire, yes, imperialists, they've taken over, the Americas, parts of, India, Australia, New Zealand. But because they took over them and brought in their technology, their people, their societal, all of those different things, it's built up everything. So even if it collapses, which, as all things do, like I said with Rome, there's still a lot of that left over.
Mm.
And if we're using Rome as an example, a lot of the modern countries like, France, Italy, England as well, even Germany, Austria, a lot of those were developed from the remnants of Rome, the Ottoman Empire as well, so modern day Turkey. A
Yeah.
lot of that came from that massive empire, which was only brought that big thanks to imperialism. So I don't think that imperialism's actually bad for us in the long run. I think it can provide a huge amount of benefits.
Well, I guess it depends on like who's doing it.
Mm.
So it can be good, it could be bad, it could be neither.
Well, that's it. You could argue it's a tool then,
Yeah,
because
I
it
mean it
really
is a
is.
tool.
It's a form of government.
Yeah, in terms of
Yeah.
political ideology, it's almost like a secondary slot in a way, because you can have like an imperialist democratic, you can have an imperialist communist, you can have an imperialist
Mm.
bloody
Fascist.
Confucianism,
Yeah.
you can have imperial, like it acts like an
That'd
imperialist
be funny.
Confucian. That would be something. That would be. I'd live there just for shits and giggles. But
Uh.
but yeah, to me, imperialism is it's a secondary slot,
Mhm.
almost like a DLC, for your nation.
It's just add on a bit of flavoring. You know what? Rome isn't complete with just the ultra nationalism. We need that imperialism for
Yeah,
that second flavoring.
yeah, yeah. Gives you
That's how
gives
you
you
conquer
gives
the
you
world.
combat buffs. Oh,
Ah. Well, yeah, I'm sure the Mongolians would have agreed with you as well.
I'm sure. But uh,
So, well, what do you think of that side of it though?
oh yeah, I
Because
mean, in terms of that, I agree. But I mean, the one thing is, it is
hmm
as a tool. It's a tool, much like philosophy. It's a tool. You can use that tool for good. You can use that tool for bad. You can use that tool for murdering someone. You can use that tool to save
yeah,
someone. It really depends on who is using it. And this brings me to another thing. In all political ideologies, and to my own opinion, everything can be good and bad. You can have a really bad democracy or a really good democracy. You can have a really bad socialist or really good, and vice versa for almost anything. It really, because people seem to forget, politics is a tool, and
they were.
it's just as good as the person who is wielding it.
I think that goes back to what we were saying in our introductory to philosophy video, is that philosophy is a tool.
Mm,
So is politics. So is a gun,
yeah,
a knife.
yeah,
So they're all tools. It's a lot of it comes down to how it's used.
yeah. That's
Um,
exactly it.
mm.
And yeah, people tend to forget that. Yeah, anything can be bad and anything can be good. It just depends on who the person is using it.
I mean,
Yeah,
if we consider the definition of politics again, if it's about the governance of a country or a group, right?
yeah,
That's very, oh well, it only depends on who's governing, right?
mm,
That's what will determine if your citizens are happy or if they're depressed because they've been shackled and whipped as slaves.
exactly.
So
Yeah. So it often makes you think like, in the future, well, what other political ideologies would you think would surface up, or like anything new? Like like always
Hmm.
like it was a good, and this is for you to the viewers too. If you want to have a good thought experiment or good thought exercise, try and develop a political system in your own head, a hypothetical world, and make up your own political ideology. Yeah, that's what I always try and do.
Hmm.
It's very interesting. It's almost like to imagine a color that hasn't been seen yet. It's something really cool. Gets your brain going. Gets the cogs going.
I mean, so that's a good way of looking at it because I think that still means that there's hope we'll find a better system in the future because we can still, use our imagination and come up with something which
Mm,
may or may not be better. But in regards to the future, well, it's like you said, socialism's back on the rise. So we
yeah.
might see some kind of, social organization or government type emerge again, which will be different, hopefully, from the communism of the past, like the Soviet Union
Mm,
and the, People's Republic. A lot of people have died under those regimes.
yeah.
So hopefully, that new one will be a bit more peaceful, or at least less lethal
Yeah.
when it's being implemented.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. But what say, Matthew? Have you been thinking about what type of future government style would be really good? Like, do you have something in mind you
Well,
want to share, or?
see, I'm a man who loves his republics. I goddamn love republics. It's one of the oldest forms of government, and it's one of the most successful forms of government. It just works. It's really hard. Well, I mean, anything can be corrupt, right? Anything.
Hmm.
It's just a universal thing, right? But with republics having entire groups being in, it's kind of hard to have a lot of corruption with that because you're only around for a certain amount of years, and you're able to be a lot more efficient with your country being a republic because everyone has their own different ideals. Like you would have like say someone representing all the scientists, someone representing all the foundry workers, and all that stuff.
If it's departmentalized,
Yeah,
yes.
and
Mhm.
that's what something I would like. I think I would want a more republic system, but something like that with our democracy. Um, but something that works more on improving and developing our nation
Yeah.
in material, in ethics, and stuff like that. Yeah,
It,
so
it's
yeah, like that.
Yeah. It's funny you mention a republic because, yeah, one of the major benefits, which has been seen over time, is like you said, it's the sort of not necessarily resistance to corruption, but dealing with it. It's a lot slower
Yeah.
because there are elections, so they're somewhat responsible to the people. So they have to maintain like that public image, of some doing something right, or
Mm.
else, they're just going to vote someone else in, right? So they can't completely, be full on tyrannical because there's going to be a vote.
Mm.
So you need at least a majority or a good portion of the people on your side. Um, in saying that, if we look at a republic, right, we have the Roman Republic.
Yeah.
That was by no means peaceful. I mean, they were, I suppose, defensive, but they took a lot of territory. I mean,
Yeah, and they
look at
held it.
Caesar and Gaul.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they held it. Um, so does that mean when you say, a sort of ideal republic, is it a peaceful republic or is it maybe a,
See, I would
more
like
aggressive?
I would like a peaceful republic, but not afraid to be aggressive when in
Hmm.
danger. That sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, because that's the issue, right? If there's something that is too peaceful or too weak, something stronger will take its place, right? And I think that's where dictatorships have some advantages over republics.
Mm.
Is that if there's a good leader, a good dictator, I should say, they can get a lot of stuff done, especially because if you have a good person in a republic, like a good president, they're still limited by the rest of the parliament
Mm.
because you're never gonna generally have 100% of the parliament on your side, right? So there's
Yeah.
always going to be some infighting. Whereas if you have a dictatorship, you could do what Hitler did, right? You could just kill them all,
Yeah.
then get your way,
Yeah.
or what Stalin did, same thing. So I don't think it's as efficient at times.
Mm.
I don't think the maximum efficiency is there in a republic compared to some more authoritarian regimes, at least for warfare.
Yeah.
But for otherwise, for maintaining a country, it's definitely far more stable in the long run.
Yeah, it is. So, what would be your ideal system?
Look, at that point, I'm just gonna have to say the least crappiest system I've sort of come up with, right, involves some form of democracy,
Yeah.
some form of voting. Now, I think we're both biased because we've been raised in a democratic nation, right,
Yeah.
and a peaceful one at that. Um, but I think you'd be combining some elements. If we look at the Roman Republic, right, they
Mm.
could, in times of emergency, vote in a dictator to
Yeah.
deal with the problem. Now, this worked at times, and at other times, it backfired and the dictator took power.
Mm.
But if you look at the long run, by the time the dictator died, it reverted back into being a republic. So, there's some pros and cons of that. I think for the future, looking at us in Australia, for example, we have a constitutional monarchy.
Mm.
I think we have a very good queen that has kept us stable, like, kept our country stable. But that's only because, she's a good ruler. If we had someone who wasn't as good, we might be a lot more unhappy.
Yeah.
But I think having that sort of, person, even if it's just a figurehead sort of watching the parliament and being able to do something, provides stability to the parliament so it doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah.
Like what we saw with the governor general beforehand, right?
Yeah.
He fired the prime minister,
Yeah.
so it provides some stability. So I think by sort of merging those two systems, you can get something good. That's just for governance, though. When it
Yeah.
comes to if it's a capitalist or a socialist structure, honestly, I'm not too sure. Because a lot of, for example, what the idea is behind the modern socialist, right? It's all about making sure that most of the money, the production, as they like to call it, the means of production, are controlled by the workers,
Yeah.
which is in this case the majority, the people, the voters. Like that, I can see the benefits to that, and it makes sense. But at the same time, look at Soviet Russia, look at Republic of China. Those are the current examples of where socialism or communism has led.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think they have as many, coffee breaks available to them as we do in a capitalist country.
Yeah. True. True that. True that.
So that is my answer.
Yeah.
It's a combination.
Mm. So before we end the recording, Paul, what any final thoughts on our discussion of politics?
They always love to talk about politics. It's more fun when you have someone else
Oh
to
yeah.
talk about it with.
So it's good to have someone a bit
So
unbiased too, like
yeah,
not like actually willing to explore.
it's good to have people who don't think the same way as you do, because
Yeah.
that means you can actually have a discussion and try to see their point of view. Just make sure it doesn't turn into an argument. So yeah, for my viewers, I was gonna say for our viewers, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say this ain't just
Yeah,
your viewers, bro.
cooperation. So, but if you are interested in philosophy, definitely talk politics. Maybe not with your family. It depends on the culture you're in, right? And the family you're in. But try to have these talks with other people. It will really broaden your horizon, and it is very interesting to talk about these things.
mm,
And if there's something else, chuck it as a question in the description, in the replies below. We might pop up some questions at some point in the future too.
Yeah, and we
keep
could
those thoughts thinking.
answer any of your questions out there, viewers. And my final thoughts on politics. Goddamn learn. Gotta learn this crap. You gotta learn. You gotta learn your surroundings. You gotta learn everything you can about politics, man. Like it's just so essential to know because you don't want to get fucked with. No one likes getting fucked. You know. You know.
And
That's
no
what
one
you gotta
wants to be
learn.
a slave either.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So you
well,
gotta know. You gotta know these
yeah.
things. You gotta know when things are happening that are bad or when they're good. So you can support it or not support it, and openly. I can't express enough. Openly express yourself. Like, there's so many people that could have the exact same thought as you do, but they just don't know what to do. So learn and express. That's my final message in regards to politics.
Right.
All
So,
right.
thank you very much, Paul. Signing out here.
Hey,
It's been
man.
a fun as always, Matthew.
Yeah, fun as always. All right. Well, we'll catch you all later. Please watch our next video at some point. Thank you very much for listening.
Cheers.
See ya.